Hello everyone, my name is Jessica and I'm the host and owner of the Fit with Faith podcast, where we talk about real stories, real struggles, and real life. And just so you know, God is always a part of the conversation. I'm glad you're here. Now let's dive in. I hope you are ready for today, because today we are talking about the enemy's lies, part 2. And the lie that we are going to talk about today is the lie that we tell ourselves, or that other people tell us. And we inherently believe, I'm too much. So, I bet you've heard that in some way, shape, or form. And don't worry, I'm going to get into that. But I want to recap and show you that the first lie that we talked about in this series is when you are told by the enemy that you're not enough. But sometimes we are made to feel the opposite, that we're too much. And I want you to understand, that's simply the devil trying to shrink you. And I want to start off by saying that the only person or people who will tell you that you're too much are people that aren't meant to be in your life in the beginning. God made you in His image and likeness. So guess what that means? It means you are never too much. You are more than enough, and you are made to be here, and you are made to live the life you're living. Everything you are was designed by God, so if someone tries to tell you that you're too much, it's only because you're too much for them. You're never too much for God. And there's been multiple times where I've been made to feel like I'm too much, whether it's I'm doing too much, or like we said last week, I'm not doing enough, or maybe who I am is too much for some people. They don't like who I am as a person, and they try to make me feel like I'm too much. They try to make you feel awkward. So both of these lies, I'm too much and I'm not enough, are meant to create doubt within you. I hope you understand that, because I bet when you feel like you're not enough, you're constantly doubting the things that you do, say, and really, honestly, you're just doubting yourself. Like, someone tells you you're not enough, and you're like, I'm not enough what? Because they never tell you, very rarely do people go into detail and tell you, like, you're not doing enough of this, you're not doing enough of that. And even if they did, I mean, what if you thought you were doing so much and then to them you're not doing enough? Like, whose scale are they trying to even equate that to? Because on God's scale, God says you're more than enough. So when someone tries to tell you that you're not enough, be like, on whose level? Who's the one trying to tell me that? Because my God didn't say that about me, and my God's the one that created me. And then also go into the fact of being too much. Like, too much of what? Too much of myself? Too much of God's child? Like, what? What am I too much of? Because ultimately, the way that I see it is that when you're told that you're too much, you start to feel insecure because you don't want to be too much, or you don't want to have like all that attention on you. So you try to fit in, which inherently means you're being less than who you're made to be. And how sad is that? Because different ways that people try to make us feel like we're too much is saying stuff like, are you sure? Well, that's embarrassing. That's so awkward. This is awkward. You're loud. Why are you wearing that? People are looking at you. You're being dramatic. Don't be too sensitive. You cry a lot. Like, all of that kind of stuff is hopefully, all of that, everything that they're saying to you is genuinely them just trying to project their own insecurities and their own levels of self-doubt onto you. Because I mean, think about it, especially the one of like, you cry a lot, like, don't be so sensitive. Well, you know what? I'm proud that I have emotions instead of being a robot. I'm sorry you don't have emotions. You don't know how to express your emotions. I cry when I'm sad. I'm sorry that you bottle things up like a toddler and wait for yourself to explode. Or the other one saying like, that's so awkward. Good. That means I'm different. That means I'm weird. That means I'm not normal. I would rather be awkward and weird than normal and boring. Okay? Why are you wearing that? Oh, I don't know, because it makes me feel good about myself. It makes me feel confident. It makes me feel alive. It's expressive. I'm comfortable in it. And then people are looking at you. Good, let them look. I'm God's child. They deserve to look at God's child. Or you're being dramatic. Okay, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But again, would you rather have someone who's monotone and emotionless, or would you rather have someone who expresses their feelings? And as I say that, don't get me wrong, I understand that there's levels to everything, because yes, people can be a little too dramatic and like take things out of context, and there's, no one likes that. And then as far as like being too sensitive, I mean, granted, if I tell someone like, hey, I don't like when you do that, and they go, oh, you didn't like when I did that, and they start throwing a fit, I'm gonna be like, yo, calm down. Keep it together. Just trying to get some common ground here. You don't need to blow a gasket. There are those cases. And I'm sure you know people that have done that to you, or maybe you've done that to someone else. Like, ladies, I'm sorry, but when you are PMSing, I am sure there's been times where you have let your emotions get way too far. And when they get way too far, you tend to say things you don't mean. You tend to be irrational. But you know what? That just means you're human. And if you can at least laugh at it, then you're good. If you don't recognize it, you got a problem. You need to understand, like, hey, babe, I'm PMSing. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to blow up on you because you didn't take out the trash. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cry. Or like, hey, pregnant women, I didn't mean to cry because my dinner got burned. Like, there's so many things that people, like, obviously take to the extremes. And I understand that. But that's different than someone looking at you and telling you that you're too much. Because when someone tells you that you're too much, or they make you feel like you're too much, like I said, they're trying to shrink you. And that's the enemy trying to get in your head and make you feel like you need to be less. Where God wants you to be you. He designed you to be you. So when you have someone trying to make you feel like you have to shrink yourself, or you have to be less than, or you have to not show as much, or you have to hide in the crowd, try to fit in better, why? Why would you want to do that? Because, like Brandon Lake's song says, I didn't come to hide in the crowd. If that woman in that song and in that story in the Bible hid in the crowd and didn't reach for Jesus's garment, she never would have been healed. And that story would have never been told. And the fact of the matter is, she is the only person in the Bible that Jesus called daughter. We would have never had that encounter had she had chosen to hide in the crowd, because she was a woman and she couldn't touch anybody, and she was also looked at like a walking disease because she was bleeding. She decided that her faith was going to be bigger than her fear, and she knew if she just touched Jesus, she would be healed. She didn't choose to think that she was bleeding too much, or that she was too sick, or too that. She knew she was. She knew it. She was like, yeah, I can't stop bleeding. And you know what? I'm tired of it. So I'm going to go touch his garment. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I'm going to see what happens. And what did he say to her? Your faith has made you well. Now, let's get into some Bible references that I want you to realize. Think about, realize, whatever. You get it. You know what I mean. Honestly. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 10. 8 through 10. Good Lord, I need to learn how to read my own handwriting. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. And now what I want you to think about with that is, you never and will never be too much for God, because guess what? He's the one that made you you. He's the one that sent Jesus Christ to save you. He's the one that watches over you every second of every day. God prepared you for right now. He picked you to live this life. He created every part of you. He chose you. He will always choose you. So why would you shrink the person that God designed you to be just to appease someone in society who doesn't know you, who barely knows you? And to be perfectly honest, if it's someone that's meant to be in your life, you'll never be too much, because you're only too much for the wrong people. The right people will embrace you, welcome you. They'll find joy in your awkwardness. They'll laugh with you. They'll go shopping with you to buy the clothes that make you feel comfortable. They'll never tell you you're too sensitive, because guess what? They'll be equally as sensitive, or they'll be able to empathize with you. They'll be able to understand why you're so upset. They'll be able to encourage you to show your feelings. And when someone tries to say people are looking at you, you're the people that are meant for you will jump in and dance with you. They'll make the funny videos. They'll accept the attention, and they won't try to make you feel like you're awkward or you're too this or too that. So another verse that I really like that proves this point is Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nations. So I want you to think about this. If God knew you before you were born, and he picked everything out about you to make you, you, that means he knows you better than you know you. And he has never thought you were too much. So that begs the question, why are you letting someone who barely knows you make you feel like you're too much? If he took his time creating you to be you, that means all these traits about you that someone thinks are too much, God did on purpose. Because these things that someone might think are too much, or you inherently, they think you yourself as a human being, as a whole human, are just too much. I can guarantee there are people in this world that need your quote unquote too much. There are people that are going to find you because you're too much, and they're going to be the people that stick around for the rest of your life. If you're single, maybe your significant other, your future significant other, needs you to be too much, because if you're not too much, you're going to stay hidden in the crowd. They're never going to find you. You ever think about that one? If you hide yourself, if you shrink yourself, you are limiting yourself from being who you're meant to be. You are preventing people from seeing you, from finding you, from the connections you can make if you just stood out in the crowd. The devil wants you to hide. Because if he can keep you hidden, you won't be able to see the light of God. You won't be able to see who you're meant to be if he can make you feel awkward enough to make you shrink and hide in the crowd. And I want you to realize this one. In the book of Esther, chapter 4, verse 14, it says, if you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made a queen for such a time as this? Now, I'll give you a little background on this story if you're not familiar. So, Queen Esther was liked by the king. And at this time, if you are unaware, women have zero authority, zero right, zero say, can't really do anything unless given permission. And if you ask for permission, you can't do that either. It's keep quiet, sit next to me, look pretty, and if I want to have kids, I'm going to have kids with you. Women did not have any authority or going up to someone and saying like, hey, let the Jewish people go. Hey, why don't you invite this person to dinner, which is inherently what she did. She asked if the guy could come to dinner, who was then later going to kill the king, which I digress. But think about this. If Esther shrunk herself down because she was a woman, she would have risked the lives of so many people because of her own fear and insecurities. However, she chose to stand firm and even said in verse 16, if I must die, I must die. She could have given in to fear. She could have accepted that she was a woman and couldn't do anything. But if she would have done that, the king would have continued to persecute the Jewish people. And maybe down the road, God would have had to send someone else. But she chose to fulfill her calling. She chose to accept the responsibility, to accept the fact that she was in a position where she could do something and she was going to do it. And like it says, if I must die, I must die. Insert the Rocky German guy or Russian guy. If he dies, he dies. If you don't know that, I'm sorry. I probably sounded really stupid, but if you do know that, you know what I mean. You have a calling, guys. You need to understand that. Like, there is a calling on your life. And the devil wants to shrink you. He does not want you to get anywhere near who you're meant to be. Because if you do, that means you're walking with God, and that means he loses. So, have you ever thought about the fact that the people trying to shrink you are only doing that because they're intimidated by you? Maybe they don't want you to level up, so they want to bring you down to their level. maybe they're insecure about themselves. So they want you to be insecure about yourself so that they feel okay. So they feel like, oh, well, at least they're not better than me. They're just the same as me. They're jealous of who you are. They're jealous of the light inside of you. And they want to do everything they can to put out that light. Because the devil doesn't like light. The devil can't hide in light. In light, things come out. Things get shown. Things get revealed. In darkness, the devil can hide. The devil can lurk. The devil can be a serpent and hide in the darkness. The devil can send his demons to hide in darkness. But when you let your light shine, he can't do anything because you'll see him coming. And see, that's the whole point of standing close to God. Because be a light unto my path, a lamp unto my feet. Jesus Christ is the ultimate light. You remember how many times in the Bible Jesus came and he shined so bright, or the angels shined so bright that you couldn't even see their faces? Heck, they shined so bright they blinded Saul. Staying close to God means you're staying in the light. Staying close to God, calling on Jesus, using the gift of the Holy Spirit that is within you, shining that gift that God gave you, being the person who you're meant to be, that keeps you in the light. And what that means is the devil can't do anything. Because, again, you'll see him coming. God will fight your battles. God already has fought your battles. However, if you put yourself in darkness, you're giving the enemy leeway to trick you, to shrink you. Because, okay, let's have a real world example. Let's say you're walking around and all of a sudden the power goes out. Doesn't that give you anxiety? To be in pitch black darkness and not be able to see the way out? To not be able to see any light? To not be able to see your surroundings? Because guess what happens in darkness? Anything and everything can happen in darkness. Which is, again, kind of a reason why I'm scared of like the deep sea ocean, because heck, you look down, you can't see the bottom. I've seen way too much Shark Network, Shark Week stuff. No thank you. I do not like what I can't see. But here's a caveat to that. Sometimes you can't see God. Sometimes we're blinded by darkness and we can't see God. Sometimes we can't hear him. Oftentimes we can't hear him. However, if you have enough faith and you believe the promises that God has said, if you believe the things that the one who created you has said about you, that you are loved, that he will never forsake you, that you are forgiven, that you are his child, that you are blessed, that you are fortunate, that you are beautiful, wonderful, fantastic, awesome, lovely, everything. God speaks that on us all the time. That we are meant for more, that we are meant to live a life with him, that we are blessed beyond measure, that we are able to do more than we can ask, think, or imagine, that there is a plan, there is a purpose, that we have a light inside of us. All of these things that God says about us over and over and over again in the Bible. If you believe these things, if you believe that you are made in his image and likeness, that means you have a light. That means that God gave you a light, that you are born with a light, and it is your job to let it shine. You are responsible for the light that lives inside of you. Do not let other people dim your light. Do not let the enemy put you in darkness. And if you are in darkness right now, if you are someone who can't see the way out, I want you to remember the fact that you do have a light inside of you and you can use it. It does not go out. It may feel like it has, but it doesn't. Because as far away from God as you try to go, he still doesn't leave you. You may have left him. You may feel like he's not with you. But guess what? He says he'll never leave us. Like I said, you may have walked away. You may be far away, but you're never too far away. See what I did there? You're never too far away, so you're never too much. And you need to realize that the devil only wants to shrink what God wants to build. So the things that God made special about you, the devil wants to take away. Because like I said, if you learn how special you are, the closer you get to God, which means the devil loses, and he doesn't like to lose. So he's going to do everything in his power to make you doubt your calling, to make you feel like you're too much, and to make you feel like you're not enough. Because if you don't think you are enough to do the calling, to fulfill the calling to begin with, you're not even going to try. And then if you try to fulfill your calling, but then you feel like you're too much, heck, you're going to give up. Because you don't like the negative attention. You don't like people telling you that you're too this, too that. So you're just going to be like, okay, fine, I'll just fit in. Y'all, fitting in is boring. And like Dr. Seuss says, you were born an original, so don't die a copy. And like something I heard Rich Wilkerson say is be peculiar, because only dead fish go with the flow. I like being too much. I like being different. I like when people look at me like I'm weird, because guess what? At least I'm entertaining. At least I'm not putting you to sleep. You're laughing at me. I'm like, I've said this for years. When people are like, oh, you think you're funny? And I go, heck, you know what? Whether you're laughing at me or you're laughing with me, I still made you laugh. So I win. I call that a win. If you laugh at me, I call it a win. Because I will laugh at me too. Because I'm not too much. I am not too sensitive. I'm not too emotional. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And God made me to be emotional. God made me to be sensitive. God made me to be loud and sometimes obnoxious. And that's totally fine. He made me to be sarcastic. He made me with a sense of humor. And I love it and I appreciate it. He has given me so many gifts and he has made me different. He has made me Jessica, a daughter of God. And I'll be damned if I let anyone ever try to tell me that I am too much of a daughter of God. Because think about that. That's exactly what someone's saying. You're too much of a God child. You're too much of a follower of God. You're too much of a daughter of God. You're too much of a son of God. Am I though? Or are you just not enough? Because I want you to think about Joseph and his brothers. When Joseph had this blessing on him, this calling on him, and his father gave him the coat of many colors, and he was like all high on his high horse of like, hey, I'm good, I got this, I'm going to be blessed, you're not. Was he a little flamboyant in that? Yes, of course he was. He was a little obnoxious, and his brothers got mad. But if his brothers would have just been like, yeah, okay, Joseph, whatever, then we'd have no story. But because he was too much for them, they sold him as a slave. And then fast forward to what ended up happening to Joseph after a hot minute. Joseph was basically the Egyptian king's right hand. And what did that allow Joseph to do? To save his brothers and his family. Now, can you imagine what would have happened if Joseph believed in the fact that he was too much because his brothers sold him to slavery? What if he thought to himself as he was being sold and taken away from his family and everything he knew, man, I guess I'm too much. I guess I was wrong. Maybe I'm not blessed. Because if I was blessed, this wouldn't be happening to me. I wouldn't be sold as a slave right now. I'd still be at home with my father and my brothers. No, Joseph didn't think that way. Granted, yes, like I said, he was a little obnoxious, but he chose to believe in the fact that he did have a gift. And although his brothers couldn't see it, couldn't appreciate it, didn't understand it, and they sold him into slavery and told his dad that he was dead, it didn't make him quit on himself. He didn't quit on his gift. He just redirected it, found a new way to fulfill it. Y'all, what would have happened if Jesus thought he was too much? Because people rebuked him. People cast him out. People made fun of him. People told him that he was wrong. That he wasn't the Son of God. They laughed at him. They mocked him. They hurt him. They arrested him. They crucified him. What if Jesus thought, this is too much? God, you've got the wrong son. This is too much for me. No one believes me. I'm being whipped. I'm being made fun of. I'm being yelled at. I'm being pushed aside. This is too much. Aren't you glad we have a God that loves when people think about being too much? Aren't you glad we have a God that made you so special that people think you're too much? Aren't you glad that your gift, your light is so bright that people think you're too much? I like it. I think it's fun. I think it's cool. Oh, you think I'm too much? You think I'm too loud? You think I worship too much? You think I talk too much? Okay. Go find less. Because I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop being too much. Because I'm not too much to God. I'm only too much to you because you can't level up. I want to keep leveling up. I don't want to stop. So no, I'm not too much because I'm not even done yet. I'm just getting started. So if you think I'm too much now, on level 1, boy, just you wait till I reach level 10. And level 11, and 12, and 13, and 14. You can stay on level 1 if you want. I don't want to stop here. God brought me this far, and he didn't bring me this far to keep me here. He brought me here so I can keep going. And the next time someone tells me I'm too much, I'm like, it's all right. Go find less. And you can say the same thing. Don't ever let someone make you feel like you're too much of something. Embrace your too much. Be different. Someone wants to try to tell you that, just be like, yeah, maybe. But at least it makes me me. At least it makes me different. Because at the end of the day, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And I'm not made for everybody. But I was made to be me. And I love me. Because God loves me. So, if you've ever been told you're too much, it's okay. I like being told I'm too much, and so should you. Because you're a child of God just like I am. And I think we're pretty great. Just saying. I think we've got a lot of things we got to do in life. And if we sit there and think we're too much, we ain't ever going to do them. I got a whole life to live of being too much for some people. But for the right people, they'll embrace this too much and love me for who I am. Love me for the person that God created me to be. And the same people are out there for you. So don't ever think that you have to stay stuck with people who think you're too much. Don't ever shrink yourself to fit in. Keep growing and look for people who are just like you. Because I'm sure there's a whole bucket of people who think that they're too much, shrinking themselves down to try to fit in. But man, you weren't made to fit in. You were made to be different. And it's like I always say, don't forget, you're fearfully and wonderfully made. I hope you enjoyed what we talked about today, because the next episode is going to be another little heavy one. I'm going to talk about how we get told all the time, or made to feel like you're lost. I don't know how I'm going to word that one yet, but inherently my goal for the next lie that the devil tries to tell us is that we're lost. So, come back next week and let's get unlost. Till next time.
Thank you so much for listening to the Fit with Faith podcast. I really hope you enjoyed the episode, and I hope you come back next week. Until then, have a good one.